Good evening, and everyone. Welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your normal host for the night, Greg Thompson, along with a special guest for tonight, Marcel Louis-Jacques, with the ESPN NFL Nation reporter for the Buffalo Bills. We're going to jump right into a really exciting show tonight, but first we're going to talk a little bit about Cover One. Anytime you guys have a chance, download the app, come and take a look at what we have going on, regardless of the offseason. Anytime things are happening, we're continuing to pump out really good content. Eric continues to put out great video breakdowns. The draft team is already jumping into draft prospects I had never even heard of. So the team is fully engaged all the way around, getting ready. And tonight, what we're going to bring to you is a really exciting partner here in the area to talk about his new role with the Buffalo Bills and ESPN. And really excited to be able to talk about this as we jump into a fun and exciting offseason and getting ready for training camp. So, Marcel, how you doing tonight?
Man, I'm feeling great. I'm not gonna lie, I feel a little underdressed, man. You should have let me know there's a dress code here. I would have grabbed a blazer or something.
No messing around. It's all business. All business. No, I'm really excited to get a minute of your time tonight. I know we've been bouncing around trying to find a time to get together, so I really appreciate you carving out a minute for us. I can't lie, man. You got kind of a dream gig for a lot of Buffalo Bills fans and everything in the Western New York and Bills Mafia area. So, tell us a little bit about your background. How'd you get to this point?
All right. Well, I grew up in Sacramento, California, and went to really small high school, Valley Christian Academy, man. But it's got heart. I think I graduated with 29 kids. When I'm talking small, I mean like just tiny.
Wow.
But even in a city like Sacramento, but no, it was a tight-knit school. Ended up at Arizona State for college. Graduated in 4 years, degree in broadcast journalism. Then I worked sales for 4 months right out of college. I worked for Yelp, calling 100 times a day. Hey, I'm your Yelp account exec. It was not for me, to say the least, man. I'm not a salesman.
A character building experience, I'm sure.
Character building, that's one of my favorite phrases, man. It just built some character. And yeah, like, you don't want to spend your money, that's okay. Then I'm not going to push. But I found my way into journalism eventually. I worked for Today's News Herald in Lake Havasu City, Arizona. Was there for about 2 years before moving on to Seguin, Texas. Actually, that's where the shirt is from.
Cool.
The office there at the Seguin Gazette, they gave me the shirt on my last day. But I worked there for a year, got a really big break covering Clemson for Orange and White and the USA Today network. And once again, another year and a half before moving on to the Carolina Panthers beat this past October. And that was just that was an eye-opening, just moving from high school to college to finally the NFL so quickly. It all I kind of knew was go. All I knew was adapt on the fly. So I joined mid-season, but I feel like after a couple of weeks, kind of got my feet under me, and grace of God here, was blessed to get this interest from ESPN. I think we first started talking in April, and a couple months later, here I am in Buffalo, New York.
That's awesome, man. I mean, really impressive. You should certainly be very proud to be able to have that kind of trajectory and path to get to this point. Certainly, you've done a lot of good to earn those doors to open. So that's incredibly impressive.
Thank you, man. Yeah, it's just like I said, it's a blessing, and it's a dream for me as well, man. Cool. I mean, that's what we all 1,000 of us that walked into Cronkite School that first day of freshman year. Everybody said, "I want to work for ESPN. I want to." And it's just, it really is a blessing to be able to live that dream.
No, that's cool. And obviously, once you get to Carolina, I'm pretty sure they hand out pamphlets of how to get to Buffalo from Carolina. That's pretty much the automated pipeline that they have going.
There it is. It's like a scavenger hunt, man. Like it's like finding Narnia or something, man. You just got to find the map.
No, it's funny. We joke about it. And obviously, anytime I always talk about it, most of my experiences on the business side, and that if I leave a company and go to a new company, I'm probably going to bring some of my good people with me, and I'm going to know who to cherry pick and who to go back and grab. And that anytime a coach or a general manager or leadership goes from one organization to another, obviously they're going to have a list of people that they'd like to bring with them. So it always kind of struck me as odd that fans found it as this weird phenomenon that, Coach McDermott and Brandon Beane brought some guys with them that they thought made sense, that they knew their character and they knew how they would fit and would help build the locker room and the culture. And that, maybe it was a little above average in the number, but it wasn't some obscene number. So it always struck me as a little odd that people found that as weird as what it was. I think that's pretty normal anytime leadership changes and moves to a new area.
Exactly. Familiarity is key here. And if you've seen guys, okay, he's a defensive coordinator right now. All he needs is the opportunity and he'll be an excellent head coach. Or you see a guy buried on the depth chart. All he needs is some extra runs, some extra play time. No, like you said, it's not a surprise. It's happens fairly often. Matter of fact, I think the pipeline went the other direction about 20 years ago.
The onset, it's really funny how cyclical it is. The onset, as they, open things up as a, introductory organization and expansion franchise, there was an awful lot going the other direction with Bill Polian doing the exact same thing, bringing an awful lot of talent and people and names that he knew from Buffalo down there. And it was Buffalo South before it turned into Carolina North.
Exactly. So, it happens. NFL is cyclical. Sports are cyclical. So not so big of a surprise.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So first, I want to get a couple of thoughts as someone who grew up in the, coastal California area and then down in Carolina. You've had the nice part of Buffalo so far. And I'm sure everyone has made the obligatory joke about what's coming 6 months from now. But what's your first experience been in the area? Any favorite foods, any highlights that you've seen so far that maybe were a little surprising?
Yeah. So like you said, growing up in California and spending so much time on the West Coast, you don't really hear about Buffalo so much except for the weather, of course. And so that's all I knew when I took that first flight to come find housing at the end of June. But, I get here and there's just so much life in the city. There's so much character, so much beauty right on the lake. I mean, I know it's summer, but you really can't beat a lakefront city. And no one ever wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to talk about the fun part of Buffalo, the food, the culture, the diversity up here, the kind of hipster looking Elmwood Village, or that unique grunge of Allentown, or that little charm of all the suburbs. I was just in Orchard Park today, been in Hamburg as well. And, it's so much better than I think the city gets credit for. And from what I hear, there was the blizzard in the 70s, and that's just been the name that's been the stigma attached to the city ever since. But, it really is, it's something you have to come out and experience. Don't let it be a national punching bag. Don't take a swing if you haven't actually been to Buffalo.
No, I honestly, I think that's going to garner a lot of appreciation and respect. And I think that that's pretty common in a lot of the U.S. Rust Belt cities. When you get through your Buffaloes, your Clevelands, your Detroits, the stigma and the association of what people think it is actually pretty significantly different from what's actually there and what's built up. And there's actually a nice little bubble from, the idea of, housing costs and the availability of entertainment and things that are around, because that stigma kind of blocks people from getting crazy and overpopulating it, that it's actually pretty nice. So it's something that I think a lot of people take pride in, and some people maybe go a little overboard in how personal they make it and how bothered they get by some of the stigma and some people giving us crap. But, it really can be a nice area. So that's awesome to hear that you've had a good opening experience.
Oh, absolutely. And you're right. Everybody wants to talk about the winter, and it's like that joke or comment where everybody thinks they're the first one to tell it. You're going to Buffalo. Oh, I hope you got a coat. Yeah, I do. I do have a coat.
Yeah.
Figure.
Yeah. Right. And honestly, for your window of time here and everything, especially when you get into some of those winter months, I'm sure you're going to be taking some trips, whether it's to the combine, to the, different areas, the bowl game, some of the different areas, or personal time back after in the off season. You might get yourself a little window that it's not bad to get out of Buffalo in mid-February. But honestly, the rest of the year, I now live in Atlanta, and I would trade Buffalo summer for Atlanta summer any day of the year. There's a lot of good. So that's awesome to hear you're having a good experience.
Absolutely. I'd trade Buffalo traffic for Atlanta traffic as well, or other way around.
Preach. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's kind of jump in a little bit into before we get into the specifics of the team. You've talked about some of those jokes and some of the people thinking they're the first person to be funny. But what has your experience been maybe in your perception of the stereotypes or the comments on the fan base and Bills Mafia versus your initial interactions as you've gotten involved, and maybe even some of your comments on what's the difference of in-person interaction versus some of the online that you've seen?
So I had a pretty high bar for Bills fans when I got here because, I mean, tailgating aside, the passion these fans display on a week-to-week basis, whether the team is, you know, 8-2 or 2-8, they're still going to be out there. They're still going to brave the snow. They're still going to be cheering on their team. And you can always appreciate that kind of love. And then when I get here, or not even when I got here, before I got here and just announced I was coming, the onslaught of welcomes and greetings and try this place, who's beating them at the airport for wings, let us know when you get here, what parts of town are you looking at. It just, to welcome somebody who hadn't written a single word about their team yet like that, it meant a lot to me. And because of that, it just makes it so much easier to do my job to the best of my ability, because I know that there are people who are counting on this kind of information, and I know that there's people who appreciate this information. And so Bills fans watching, thank you guys for that welcome into the city. Has not gone unnoticed. And no, they've exceeded, like I said, an already really high bar.
No, that's awesome. And I'm really happy to hear that, because, it's not easy. People take it overly serious, and some of the stereotypes that go with some of those Rust Belt towns where, there's not the same spectrum of opportunities and options of things that are out there, which drives to an incredible amount of investment and personal identification in our teams. And I always joke that I love the Buffalo Bills more than anything I'm not related to. And whether that's healthy or not, it's true. And I know I'm not alone. And there's an awful lot of people who feel that way about this abstract entity that doesn't actually have anything to do with me, but I've invested an awful lot of personal identity in. And, people take that seriously. So that's awesome to hear that they've reached out and let you know how excited we are, and that you will soon learn people will, just devour any bit of Bill's content that's out there. So everything you put out there is going to get, read and dissected the moment you put out there with a lot of passion and excitement. And I know for someone who, like yourself, who takes your craft seriously and wants to put out good, insightful information, I think this is the right group that I think, I certainly pay attention to some of the demographics and some of the numbers as far as, who pays attention to what and read things like that. And, regardless of the size of the actual market from a raw number standpoint, the investment and the percentage you get of the people who are diving in and actually, devouring that content that's out there, I think you're going to get some pretty healthy engagement from what you put out there into the market. So I'm excited to see how that starts as you really get to dive in full force.
Exactly. I mean, training camp starts next week, and that's really when that passion starts to burst. As a fan, I've been there. You bottle it up. It's the off season. It's kind of a dead time between the last mini camp and the first day of training camp, and then you just see that clip of your favorite players walking into whatever facility they're at, whether it's a college, whether it's their home facility or their practice center in Oxnard. It doesn't matter. What team you're a fan of, there's always just that feeling of, oh my God, football season is back. And I'm excited to share that. I mean, we get the same thing in the media. We get that level of excitement as well, because now it's the fun time of year again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So speaking of which, let's kind of dive right in. Let's start at a high level. What are your thoughts on the overall team and where you think you're coming in on maybe the spectrum of the cycle that NFL teams go through, and that your perception of where they are on kind of the, challenges of the rebuild and what McDermott and Beane have built, and where you maybe think they are in the upswing of things?
Yeah, I think well, first of all, the AFC is the AFC is in a great spot right now, but it's tough to break into those 6 spots to get into the playoffs. Yeah, I mean, the 4 division winners are always going to be strong, and then you're battling with some combination of Indianapolis or San Diego or Los Angeles, excuse me, um, or Houston. Or just there's always going to be these squads that are difficult to knock off. But I think Buffalo they're right on the cusp of playoff contention, if not right there, just past that threshold. This defense is obviously elite, and the fact that they're going to put 11 guys on the field next year who all contributed in 2018 is big. Just continuity is everything right now, and it always has been. But continuity, when you've got a top 3 unit, is inexplicably vital. Offensively, I think they're deeper than they've been in the past. I'm not ready to say that Josh Allen is outright the guy. I think he showed some promise as a rookie. I think he showed he can play in the league as a rookie. But teams have 11 games, 11 starts with the film on him now. They know what he's good at. They know his tendencies. They know how to exploit them. And so I'm very interested in seeing how Josh addressed his perceived weaknesses and improved and developed as a passer over the offseason. And I'm wondering how he gels with this new crop of playmakers. I think GM Brendan Bean, he did a good job of getting proven veterans in important positions this offseason. Guys like John Brown, who is one of the better deep ball receivers in the league. Cole Beasley, sure-handed, good routes, safety blanket for him. Ferret Gore in the backfield. He's been around for so long. He might not be putting up the same production as he was in 2011, 2012, but I think mentally he's about as good, if not better, than he's ever been. So if those pieces come together, if this revamped line comes together, then I think Buffalo can take some teams by surprise. They do have a pretty favorable schedule this season, and we'll see what they can do.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up some really good points. And when you look at how this offseason was approached, I think, Aaron and I spent a lot of time leading up to this and kind of bracing fans for, hey, we know we have a lot of cap space, but don't go overboard. This isn't going to be some spending spree. And I have to be honest, for someone who I pride myself from a business standpoint, I spend a lot of time on Over the Cap and Spot Track and sites like that to understand the nuance of that kind of thing. Signing 19 unrestricted free agents was nowhere in the realm of my expectation of what they were going to do. And I think it spoke to the fact that you didn't say it, but as you were kind of going into that discussion of who they added, I don't think there's a lot of elite talent on the Bills offense of where they're at, but the depth of genuine NFL caliber talent is greater than it's been in a long, long time. And that you might have your 6th, 7th, 8th offensive lineman is a genuine NFL caliber offensive lineman. Your 3rd, 4th receiver, 5th receiver even might be a genuine NFL caliber offensive lineman. That we might cut TJ Yeldon because he might be our 4th best running back. We haven't had those kind of problems for a long, long time to be able to make those kind of decisions. So now would I like to see a Julio Jones or an Ezekiel Elliott? Sure. Let's not get crazy, but having that depth of genuine NFL caliber talent and across all positions, I think really puts us in a position to at least make an informed decision on Josh Allen, to know that this is a good window to see what he's capable of, and that we've surrounded him with some good, genuine talent. And then, maybe Mitch Morris is on the higher end of things. Maybe Cole Beasley is good as far as a slot receiver goes. Maybe John Brown is really good as far as a deep threat goes, and the role they play, they can be a strong element of that, but that we can now make an informed decision on him going forward.
I agree. And like you said, there is serviceable at worst.
Yeah, correct.
Around here now. Serviceable at worst and highly productive at best. But you said it. There's no superstar on offense. I don't think, besides maybe Josh Allen and the occasional LaShawn McCoy, there's not a whole bunch of jerseys being sold on the offensive side of the ball right now. But the talent gap between starter and maybe second or third string is is close and a lot closer than it's been in the past. And that's critical in an NFL season where, injuries happen by the barrel load, and even star-studded teams can be riddled to bottom feeders when that star talent gets hurt if they don't have depth. And so I like what Brandon Beane's done in adding that depth and making sure that, there's a high floor for this offense here.
No, I think that's a great point. And that, again, that you hope for good injury fortune. And I think there's a few spots, obviously if Josh Allen got hurt, if Mitch Morris got hurt, those are some spots that I don't know that we have a great path towards. But honestly, if Quentin Spain or Spencer Long got hurt and we had to play John Feliciano, does that really matter? If Ty Nsekhe got hurt and you had to play Cody Ford, if Tyler Kroft got hurt and you had to play Dawson Knox, if Frank Gore gets more reps or TJ Yeldon or Devin Singletary, we're already not at the superstar level to begin with at some of those, but we're at a genuine NFL caliber level, and the next guy is also at that level. So hopefully that can kind of keep some, like you said, continuity is key to be able to continue on that path and run that same offense and give Josh a chance to be able to maintain that consistency.
Those are great points. And just going back to Brandon Beane's his spending in free agency, traditionally Buffalo's not getting the game breaker without either a trade, a draft, or drastically overpaying. And so instead of trying to overpay for somebody that might make a big splash, like I said, I like what he's done to add that safety cushion here. And I think Josh Allen, now if this backfield can shoulder a better load than it did, more of a load than it did last season, Josh Allen can focus less on, trying to make things happen with his legs and start to develop more as a passer and start to stretch defenses out with that, with that cannon attached to his right shoulder.
Yeah, no, I can't lie. I have no interest in Josh Allen running for 1,000 yards, which is what the pace he was on last year. I don't even want him to run for 600 yards. I don't want him to lose the threat that it presents to defenses, and that, hey, every once in a while when you run 4 wide and 4 verticals and they run man and the middle linebacker turns his back, okay, make them pay. I'm good with that. But I have no interest in him taking extra hits and anything like that. So I'm hopeful that the investment in signing 6 unrestricted free agents on the offensive line and drafting Cody Ford 38th overall, that we're going to get more open lanes for Shady McCoy, and that we can keep Shady fresh with 12 to 15 touches per game, because Frank Gore can take 8 to 10 of those, and that every once in a while you sprinkle in a Devin Singletary or TJ Yeldon. I'm hoping that offensive line makes that more feasible from a rushing game standpoint, to where Josh isn't our leading rusher, which is an embarrassing situation to be in.
Yeah, it's not it's not great unless you've got primetime Michael Vick. Then I'm not really feeling the quarterback as your leading rusher, but yeah, it kind of led to a lot of fans, and I get the question a lot, drawing Cam Newton comparisons to Josh Allen, and
it's not wrong.
I don't think so. I just don't see it. I don't see it. I think Cam he's a more talented runner, and that's more of his skill set than Josh Allen. I don't think mentality wise, risk taking, gunslinging mentalities, I don't think that lines up between Josh and Cam. I see more Brett Favre. I see more, more of a guy who likes to gamble, a guy who trusts his arm, maybe too much at times, but because it gets him out of a lot of trouble. I see more of that than Cam Newton. They're tall and they both ran for a lot of yards as a rookie. That's about all I see.
Yeah, it's interesting, and Aaron and I have talked about that on several occasions, that I think there are a lot of check boxes that can take you down that path. So I've made the analogy myself in the past, but I do think you make a good point on the intention and how much of the core competency and core skill set it represents, where you hear interviews with Josh and you'll hear people ask, "Oh, I didn't realize you were that kind of runner." And he'll say, "Yeah, me neither. I didn't think that was there either." And I almost think you touched on it earlier on whether it was teams being aware that, hey, his only weapon's a deep ball. Don't let him beat us with that. We don't have to worry about him coming in short. And they didn't really calculate the fact that, hey, we can drop back because he's not going to do a drop-off pass, but oh, I guess he might run. I think that several teams didn't really game plan for that appropriately. So I'm curious to see how much that changes. I'm hopeful that Dable is ready to put him in a position to take advantage of that with some of the mid-tier routes to get over that first layer if they do kind of come down a little bit more, or that, hey, we got Cole Beasley for a reason if they're going to drop back. And I think Cole Beasley is going to be a big part of that. And a lot of plays that were his dump off runs before will now be quick passes to Beasley and let Beasley run with the ball. So I'm curious how that plays out, but I think that might be an alternative to him running this year.
I think that's, like you said, you brought up great points. They brought in the right personnel to offset those broken plays. Like, something breaks down, you're looking to the slot, you're looking to a tight end, you're looking to your backs. So they gave him
TJ Yeldon out of the backfield.
They gave him more help. I would not expect him to run for 600 plus yards, and I guarantee no team wants to give up another 100 rushing yards on 6 carries like Miami did.
No one wants to be the Kiko Alonso highlight for this year.
Yeah. Nobody's doing that this year. I wouldn't expect too many triple-digit rushing games from Josh Allen.
No, and I'll happily take that. Let's flip over to the other side of the ball, where I actually think Bills fans are okay to have a little higher level of expectation on the defensive side of the ball. And I think there's a little noise in the number 2 ranking last year. I think there were several games where some teams maybe took the air out of the ball and ran the ball more, where maybe the yardage total would have been a little bit different. But I do think that Sean McDermott has built a modern NFL defense with an incredibly fast back seven. And the linebackers they have, especially Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano, and then the secondary with 5 or 6 NFL caliber safeties, 5 NFL caliber corners, multiple who can play the slot. There's a lot of depth of talent in that back seven. I know we had talked about in kind of prepping for the show, we talked about tipping points on offense and defense. I think it's kind of a default that Josh kind of is that tipping point on offense. But on defense, what do you see as the biggest key to either maintaining that number 2 ranking, or maybe a high ranking on yardage, but more dynamic plays, more game-changing plays? What do you think might be the key in a unit or an individual player on the defensive side?
Sure. And you look at the numbers from last year, and they were, I think it was 18th in points allowed per game. But that happens when, pick sixes happen, and that counts against the team and therefore the defense. Turnovers, bad field position. There are a lot of little factors you can't look at points allowed and say that's how defense is. Middle of the road, 16th in rushing yards allowed per game. But you can do that when you're only giving up $170 through the air. And I think right now you made a great point about this back seven, specifically the Hyde, Poyer, and White combination, which I think is the closest thing the league has today to that Thomas Chancellor and Richard Sherman as far as effectiveness in the defensive backfield. Middle of the field is great. Edmonds, Alexander, Milano, they're great players. What they need to improve on, and where I think Buffalo can take that next step, is getting more pressure on opposing quarterbacks. 26th in sacks right now. That combination of Hughes, of Shaq Lawson, of Trent Murphy, they need to put more pressure, bring more pressure from the outside. But I think adding a guy like Ed Oliver, whose specialty is that interior pass rush, who can force a quarterback out of the pocket, I think that's going to do nothing but good things once he understands what his roles are, once he understands the speed of the game here and gets his feet under him. So if they can add more, or if they can apply more pressure to the quarterback, if they can pump those sack numbers up or force some more errant throws and let that secondary be great, then there's no reason that Buffalo doesn't repeat as a top 3, top 5 defense.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I see it, I don't know that Buffalo, we are big fans of Jerry Hughes, and I think that he has kind of a hidden superstar element, that his, pass rush rate, his hurry rate, some of the things where you measure him against other top-notch, your DeMarcus Lawrence, your Von Miller, your Khalil Mack, he's actually on par in the overall pressures. Now, he's significantly below that in finishing those plays, and I think a lot of that comes from there's nothing else coming in there, and that, yes, Do Khalil Mack and Von Miller and DeMarcus Lawrence make some of those plays purely on their own on just exceptional talent? Yes. But some of those are because pressure from the other side or collapsing the pocket there pressures the quarterback towards them, and they're the finisher on the play in a team defensive line pressure. And I think that hopefully a healthy Trent Murphy and adding an Ed Oliver can give a little bit more of that this year to let Jerry Hughes, his high rate of pressures and quarterback hits, turn into double-digit sacks, or sharing that across the defensive line where there's multiple guys at 7, 8, 9 sacks altogether cumulatively, because I think that, Shaq Lawson might be a little bit better as a 3-technique, third and long defensive tackle than a rundown defensive end. Trent Murphy, a year removed from ACL surgery. Ed Oliver coming up that way. Jordan Phillips, even as a 6'5", 340-pound man, that dude's first step is ridiculous. So I think that combination of being a legitimate 7 deep on the defensive line, there's a fourth defensive end spot there that I have a little anxiety about, but 7 deep on the defensive line as a rotational basis, I think you can keep, nobody above 60, 65 snaps, everybody playing 35, 40 snaps, good, healthy rotation that hopefully they can turn that into getting home more often.
I agree. Rotation is a key word there, because that allows people, like you said, to stay fresh. So you get consistent pressure throughout the game. You don't get that fatigue, the half, moves late in the third and fourth quarters. And I like the idea of adding a guy like Shaq Lawson, maybe asking him to get pressure inside. I think interior pressure, it's trending now. You see it across the league. And once again, it's going to make, when you flush a quarterback out of a pocket, that's just going to make life easier for guys coming around the outside. It's going to make life easier for guys like Jerry Hughes. But like rotation, keep them fresh. And the pass rate, it's got nowhere to go but up. 26 is not anything to be proud of from last year.
Yeah. So I think there's reason to have expectation. Like I said, I think that the number 2 overall rating in yards, I think there was a little skewed there in some of the teams that were, those early games against the Ravens and the Chargers and some of the blowout games where teams kind of took the air out of the ball and just kind of ran it out at the end. Those could have been games where if they needed to keep pressing the ball to pass a little bit more, it might have been a little different. But I think the baseline there, and like you touched on right when we opened up, the continuity that this is now the 3rd year with Leslie Frazier as the defensive coordinator, with Bobby Babich as the linebacker coach, with Sean McDermott as the head coach, with the 3rd year of Trey White, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, the 3rd year of Jerry Hughes. Everybody knows exactly what their role is, exactly what to do, can communicate very clearly. The 3rd year of Matt Milano, a 2nd year of an incredibly young Tremaine Edmonds. I think there's a lot of potential there to become, at minimum, really good and potentially something special on defense. And I think there's a possibility that it could be a special unit there.
I think it is. I mean, they're going to have to carry this team. That is the strength. And with the coaching staff, it's no surprise. You got a defensive minded guy who can, he knows his offense. Don't get me wrong, but a defensive minded coach in Sean McDermott, a defensive coordinator who's been a head coach before in the NFL, and Leslie Frazier. That's always invaluable. So, no, I think, once again, they're obviously the strength of this unit. The tipping point is just being able to apply more pressure, because you're not seeing a lot of dynamic defenses who can't get to the quarterback. That's it really all starts there. It starts at that line of scrimmage. If you speed up that quarterback's clock, you've got guys in the backfield. You've got guys in the secondary, Hyde, Poyer, who can make an offense pay for rushing, for haste, for poor blocking. And it just really has to start there.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. Yeah, those mistimed throws, trying to squeeze it in, trying to be able to fit something in there where they shouldn't, throwing off balance, throwing while they're on the run, getting pressured. Now those guys can get home. And some of the stuff that Trey White can put up more of those game-changing plays and be able to get maybe some of the attention he deserves. I think that's a great point. As we kind of move forward here and get into the final phase of the show, I had put out there beforehand maybe an idea to give us maybe one bold prediction. What's one thing that you think might be maybe a little off the radar, or maybe a little out there for what fans are expecting or looking for, maybe an area that wasn't a strength that you might see coming out here? What's maybe one bold prediction that the team could look for that you think might be on the radar?
I think they get a 1,000-yard receiver in Zay Jones. I think he showed a lot in a very developmental year for him last year. I think with a reestablished focus, with the confidence to know that he can be effective. I think year 3, it's a time for a receiver to not only prove his value in the league, but prove his value to the team, prove his role on the team. So we want bold Zay Jones, 4 digits.
No, I love that. I think that's actually I've been more Zay Jones defender than anything as opposed to a fan, but people keep talking about, don't get me wrong, Robert Foster had a nice finish to the season. He did have some really awesome highlights, a couple big play games, but even in the final stretch, in those last 6 games where Robert Foster came back, Zay Jones in those 6 games led the team in targets, catches, and touchdowns, even in those 6 games, let alone the whole season. So I think that he gets a bum rap in people thinking maybe he's a bust even. I think it's kind of crazy to get to that point. And now in today's modern NFL, that 3rd season as a rookie kind of is the contract year, and the way that a lot of teams give out extensions that early spring, like the Bills just did with Jerry Hughes, with the full year left on his contract. That decision's coming for Matt Milano, for Deion Dawkins, and for Zay Jones, that if the team feels ready next March likely is when you're going to see some of those extensions given out a year prior to their contract coming up. And Zay Jones is absolutely in that target there. If he has a strong if he puts together a 1,000-yard season here, I think we're going to see a healthy, maybe Robert Woods type extension coming for him.
I think so too, and it's always the year before. You never want guys in contract years. You don't want that kind of distraction. You want to take care of you guys as quickly as possible. You want to make sure that you develop a core and keep them around for as long as humanly possible. But as far as bold though goes, as long as we're talking receivers, I want to watch David Sills. I think
interesting.
I think his skill set, the go deep and I'm going to chuck it. That's right in his wheelhouse, and I think Josh, that's something he's going to appreciate. I think he's going to get time while a few players are rehabbing and coming back from injuries. I think he's going to get time to develop chemistry. I think he's a 6'4" kid, needs to put on some weight, but you throw that up to him in the red zone, and those 50-50 balls start to become 70-30. I think he is if he can do what he did at West Virginia, obviously different level of talent here, but I think he's got the foundation to be a special receiver. I was surprised that to see him go undrafted, but I think he's somebody to keep an eye on.
Some of our guys had him as a 3rd or a 4th round talent, and for a long stretch from the 5th round on is the top player available on the board, and then to go undrafted to sign with Buffalo. So there's been several fans who have clung on to him as this new obvious talent, and I've tried to temper that a little bit, that there probably is a reason he didn't get drafted, and I think you touched on it. Ideally, I would love for him not to make the roster, to get onto the practice squad and to spend a year in an NFL nutrition and workout system to get his body ready to stand up to a 16-game NFL schedule. Now, the preseason and training camp is going to be the key. If he starts making some highlight catches and some of those 50-50 balls and coming down with them over and over again, they might not be able to expose him to waivers, and maybe he does hang on to make that opening day roster. In the chat, Warcode's bringing up about Duke Williams. Some similar people have had that with his highlights in the CFL. I've made the point that as a 25-year-old, Duke Williams is more physically ready to play NFL special teams than David Sills is, and that right now the battle for wide receiver 6, if they keep 6 receivers, that might be the tiebreaker, even though I pretty confidently think David Sills has a higher likelihood of a better outcome of a long-term NFL wide receiver. that Duke Williams might have more impact day one on an NFL roster because of his special teams. But I think that there's a chance that if David Sills can harness, he led the NFL or led the NCAA twice in touchdowns, I think, having that kind of talent to make big plays and go up for balls with a quarterback willing to give him a chance to do that. I think that is interesting, and that would be a quite a story if he carves out a role for himself and just makes it impossible to be able to expose him to waivers when that cut down day comes.
I agree. And you mentioned guys making an impact on special teams. One guy I've been waiting to see, and I've actually been waiting on to see him make an impact for a couple years now, is Ray McCloud. Covered him at Clemson, so there I do have a little bit of background with him. But this was a guy who surest hands in college football during his junior year. I don't think he dropped a pass, and I think he had the most targets and most catches without a drop in the NCAA. But 5-star running back coming in. I know we're reaching back to high school, but that kind of field vision doesn't go away. He's a guy that can be effective with the ball in his hands in space. He's a guy who I thought would make a mark a little sooner as a punt returner, and who might emerge in camp as a punt returner. But I'm keeping an eye on. There's a lot of receivers, no superstar talent right now, but plenty of depth. To the fact that we're talking about wide receiver 6, about possible ways for them to make an impact. I think that if he's watching, Brandon Beane and company would smile like, okay, I think they
did okay. Yeah, they did okay. And it's funny. Both Noah and Daniel in the chat here bringing up some really good points. I think, honestly, the top 5 are probably a lock. That obviously Zay Jones, Robert Foster, John Brown, and Cole Beasley are going to make the team. Andre Roberts is going to make the team. He actually costs more to release than he does to keep, and he was an all-pro punt and kick returner. So those top 5 are pretty much a lock. I think it's more likely than not that they do keep 6 receivers. I think most of Bean and McDermott's history and most teams in the NFL, 6 is a more normal number than 5. Every once in a while you see 7. But realistically, I think you have Ray McCloud, David Sills, Duke Williams, Isaiah McKenzie, a handful of other Victor Boltons and other names probably fighting for one spot and only a 60% chance at that one spot. And that's awesome to have that kind of potential and talent with that kind of single opportunity, and maybe not even that opportunity is, again, that's just not a situation the Bills have been in a long time, that, we're probably going to cut a handful of guys who likely could get picked up by other teams and on cut down day.
I agree. That's and it falls back to a theme, I feel like, for our conversation tonight, and that's depth and functional depth. So, and even if they go through this year without a guy who maybe emerges as a go-to target, there are a crazy amount of playmakers in this upcoming draft. We're looking way far ahead, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel, even if this tunnel's already pretty bright.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great point. And I think that our, not worst case scenario, but the likely scenario is we find that 2 or 3 of these 4 guys are really good in their role, not a number 1 wide receiver, but good at their role as a deep threat or a slot guy or whatever it is, and good at that. And we might need to add a number 1 guy over the top, but they're still good NFL caliber players in that role. So, that's really exciting to be in that kind of position and having these kind of conversations. These are not the conversations the Bills fans have been having for the past couple of years. So let's move forward into one other area that we've been putting out on Twitter and on some of the different social media, and that's our hashtag for AskCover1. And we've had a lot of really good questions coming in, and Aaron and I are going to do another show this weekend kind of going over the defensive backs and continuing our positional preview. But we wanted to grab one of those to bring to you tonight and to be able to get your insight here. And I thought it was a good one. It was from Dan Borello, and it was, what do you see as the next big offensive trend in the NFL? I thought that was an interesting question to think about, as we've seen some of the different things and what a Sean McVay or a Kyle Shanahan's brought, what maybe a Cliff Kingsbury might bring. What do you think might be on the horizon here as one of the next big offensive trends?
And I'm going to I'm gonna try to expand on a topic my former beat partner Jordan Rodrigue brought up. It is the absolving the number one receiver, the 6'3", 6'4", do everything kind of guy. I think that is closer to being a relic than a staple. I think the big thing now, the best attribute a receiver can have right now is the ability to separate. And I think small shifty guys tend to separate a little better than wide radius. Right. I think that the way the league is going, and you're seeing it, the best possible example being a guy like Tyreek Hill, who could be a generational talent and who we could never see again. But that's a discussion for another time.
Yeah. On the field wise, is an unbelievable talent.
Because he's a guy who, if you get him the ball with about 6 yards of space, he can score from wherever he's at on the field. And you're seeing teams like, obviously I'm I have a little background with them, but the Carolina Panthers are a team that are doing that right now with a guy, a quick hit offense like North Turner likes to operate, pass catching back like McCaffrey, guys like DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel who turn into running backs when they get the ball in their hand. And so that's why I think guys like that fit Ray McLeod's build, or that fit that shifty build, are the future of the wide receiver position in the league.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it's funny, my idea going along with this is very similar in that whether it's the elimination of that role versus the idea of positionless football, and that I think you brought up three perfect examples. If you lined up Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, and Curtis Samuel and brought in a generic football fan and asked them, hey, what position did these three guys play? One, they're probably going to guess they all three play the same position because they're built pretty darn similar. And the question would be, maybe slot receiver. I'm not exactly sure. And that idea, I think that could go there. And I actually think that the stereotypical number one receiver is going to blend and more further and further into the what's a number one receiver versus what's a Zach Ertz, Travis Kelce's slot tight end. And I think you'll still have that bigger guy who is a matchup problem in the red zone, but is more of that mold and less of the Lee Smith blocking tight ends, more of the bigger bodied matchup problems in the slot, and then way more of those positionless guys who can move around and maybe get a jet sweep coming around the end, and maybe get a bubble screen and might take off on you and catch you on a double move going deep. And I think you're spot on. I think that there's going to be more and more creative offenses who aren't going to care about stereotypical archetypes and criteria of what you need to be to get drafted. The Bill Parcells model that, hey, you have to check these 4 boxes for me to even consider you. I think some teams are going to figure out that there might be a kind of a hack in the market there that you can get some talent and put them in the right spots. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and like those 4 boxes, Marty Herney told me it was Marty, not Ron Rivera, but they basically said the same thing, that the boxes a receiver needs to check, size out the window. You need to be able to catch the ball. You need to be able to separate. You need to be willing to block, and you need to have that vision to find the open space once that ball is in your hand. As long as you can do those 4 things, I think you'll have a successful career in the NFL. And the faster you are, it's not going to hurt you either. So,
sure.
If I'm looking ahead, 10 years into the NFL, I'm not expecting to see a whole bunch of Julio Jones builds. I'm not expecting that. I'm expecting more of the Tyreek Hill builds to start, the Antonio Browns to start running the league.
No, I think you're really smart in that approach, because it's not, if I had to guess, it's not that Julio Jones won't be in the NFL in 5 or 10 years from now. It's that he's probably playing defensive end. He's probably playing if you get that size and build and power, your best way to market yourself, to make money, to have a good career projection might be in that avenue. Whereas more of the, tweeners, guys that they're like, maybe you got to be a running back because I don't know if you could be a receiver because you're not Randy Moss. Those guys were maybe shoehorned into that role. And maybe Tyreek Hill ended up as a running back at Eastern Carolina who never got a shot to make it in the NFL anymore. Now, that path with your Antonio Browns, with those guys like that, I think you could see a little bit more of that direction that could come up. That could be interesting to see where people see that path. I think we've seen the same trend of guys who got caught in that pocket before that, hey, when you wanted everyone to be an AJ Green and you were 6 foot or 6'1", well, now all of a sudden maybe you're a cornerback. And before, every 6'1" athletic outside guy was always a receiver, and now maybe they're a cornerback versus before it was the 5'9", 5'10" guy who turned into a cornerback. So those kind of shifts and cycles are interesting to see. I think you might be a step ahead on that and what might be to come.
And I love seeing that. And you see it at every position. Like you said, once upon a time, if you weren't 6'1", 6'2", you're getting scoffed at if you line up for receiver. Defensive tackles had to be, 6'4", 6'5", 335, 340 pounds. Now you can slim down a little bit as long as you're quick enough to hit your gaps and apply that interior pressure. Corners, you're 5'10" and under. All of a sudden, we went through a shift in the league where guys are 6'2", 6'3", playing cornerback, and 5'10" playing free safety. This league is a never-ending showcase of how talent eventually can change the landscape of a perception. That some guys, sometimes you're just too good not to put out of position. And that sets a trend for guys with similar builds when coaches start saying, well, hey, he can do it. Why not this guy? Yeah. And it's just one of the things I love about the game.
Absolutely. Awesome comment in the chat. Noah brought up here. If teams still believe that you had to check every box for a number one wide receiver, DK Metcalf doesn't go 64th in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, look at DK. He had he was a combine hero, except
every stereotype.
Except his shuttle, his agility, his ability to separate, other than a just straight on sprint, rose a few concerns. So you don't separate.
Yeah.
He's big enough to be a blocker. Is he willing to block? Don't know yet. Hands, not enough of a sample size to definitively say this guy's got a solid set of hands or not. You start to see why he gets all the way to the third round, where I think he is an incredible value for Seattle back there. But that's why you're seeing so many guys of, smaller stature or different skill sets go before him.
Absolutely. So I really enjoy the time tonight. Want to be respectful of your time here and get ready to close things out. We've got some awesome comments here. So I know you've I think built up a lot of excitement of your coverage coming up here. Why don't you give us a little bit of a preview of what to expect as you get into your first training camp here in Buffalo, heading out to St. John Fisher, maybe some upcoming work to be able to let the fans know what to expect.
Sure. So tomorrow, I believe you can expect and this is nationwide for ESPN, the biggest questions heading into training camp, the biggest storyline heading into training camp, once practices actually begin. One thing I've heard from a lot of fans here is is frequency. They want more frequent content, and I understand that. So I'm going to be doing everything I can to learn as much as I can about this team in those first couple days. But I've said this on every show I've been on this offseason. I am here for you. And I'm talking to you Bills fans right now. I'm here for you. I'm here to bridge that gap between the team and yourselves. If you want to know something, if you bring something up, I am not perfect. There's a chance I missed something. Please do not be afraid to ask, to let me know, to send emails, and I'll do everything I can to go look into it. But I think I'm excited for this training camp. I think there's going to be a lot of guys who've got an opportunity to establish a role over the next several weeks. And it's really the last chance we get to finally, build some summation of what to expect from a team this year. So, I think my ats in my Twitter handles in the comment section. Man, I try to reply to every message. I try to reply to as many tweets as possible. Let me know what you're interested in. Let me know what questions you have, and I'll take it from there.
Awesome, man. I really appreciate it. Again, Marcel's Twitter handle is at Marcel_LJ. Put that in the Twitter comments here, and we'll send that out in some of the post-show broadcast that goes out here. Really appreciate your time tonight. It's been great to be able to kind of talk and get a feel for your background and how you got to this path. I'm really excited about the future in front of you. I think that it's really exciting to have somebody with the approach and the perspective that you bring to a very passionate fan base. So I think you're going to be excited to see the engagement and the buy-in from Bills fans and everything that's out there. So welcome aboard. We're excited to see everything that you have, and we'll devour every word of it as it comes out.
I know Bills Nation will, or Bills Mafia will, but thanks for having me on, man. Awesome conversation. Can't wait for the next time.
Excellent. Thank you. So again, thank you guys tonight. If you have a chance here, we'd love to have you go out, give us a rating or review. If you listen to us tonight on YouTube, if you jump aboard and listen as you download on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Google Play, wherever you find us, give us a rating and let us know what you think about the content here. We try to work very hard to be able to bring the best things to you that we can, to be able to bring good content and good information. Appreciate everything you guys do. Let us know what you think. Tell a friend, tell somebody else that is a Bills fan to check us out. We appreciate that very much. Those referrals and comments mean a lot to us to share us amongst Bills Mafia. So thank you, everybody, tonight. We appreciate all your time. We are out.